warm welcome, a grand party, but the real celebration begins when the guests realize they're on the menu. Ayan and Sarah had been searching for the perfect home for months when they finally stumbled upon a charming old house in an upscale yet eerily quiet neighborhood. The price was surprisingly low, almost too good to be true, but they dismissed any doubts, eager to start their new life. The house itself had a classic, timeless beauty, tall arched windows, a grand oak door, and ivy creeping up the brick walls. Though a bit aged, it felt like a place with history, a home with stories etched into its very walls. On their first evening, as they unpacked boxes, a gentle but deliberate knock interrupted the silence. When Ion opened the door, a well-dressed couple stood before them. The man, Mr. Blackwood, had sharp features, slick-back hair, and a posture so poised it almost seemed unnatural. Beside him, Mrs. Blackwood exuded an air of elegance, her dark, wavy hair framing a pale, flawless face. Their smiles were warm, yet something about their presence sent a faint chill through the air. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Mr. Blackwood said in a smooth, velvety voice. "We've been eagerly waiting for you. Welcome to the neighborhood, but not everything is as it seems. Watch till the end to uncover the chilling truth. This is Veils of Night. You simply must join us for our annual Halloween party at the Blackwood Mansion," Mrs. Blackwood said. "It's a beloved tradition, and everyone in the neighborhood attends." Ayan and Sarah exchanged hesitant glances, feeling an odd chill despite the couple's friendliness. Yet not wanting to seem rude, they nodded and accepted the invitation, unaware of the sinister secret hidden behind those welcoming smiles. Sarah turned the invitation card over in her hands, admiring its intricate gold borders and vintage design. But what caught her attention was the writing, elegant, flowing script inked in a deep, almost blood-red color. The words sent an inexplicable shiver down her spine. "A night to remember. Come hungry." She frowned, exchanging a glance with Ion. The phrasing felt odd. Was it just a playful Halloween theme, or was there something more to it? The ink looked strangely thick, almost as if it had been written with something other than regular ink. Sarah let out a nervous chuckle, brushing off her unease. It was just a party invitation, after all. What was the worst that could happen? As Ion and Sarah stepped out of their car, they gazed up at the towering Blackwood mansion. The grand estate loomed against the night sky, its Gothic architecture bathed in the soft glow of flickering lanterns. Elegant, cobweb-draped chandeliers hung from the high arched entryway, and carved pumpkins lined the stone pathway, their sinister grins illuminated from within. The mansion was beautifully decorated for Halloween, yet something about it felt unsettlingly ancient, too preserved, too perfect, as if untouched by time. The ivy-covered walls seemed to whisper secrets, and the towering stained-glass windows reflected a dim, unnatural glow. As the heavy doors creaked open, revealing a candlelit interior, a strange sense of déjà vu washed over Sarah, as if she had stepped into a place that had been waiting for her all along. As Ayan and Sarah stepped into the grand ballroom, they were met with an eerie yet mesmerizing sight. The guests, dressed in extravagant Victorian-era attire, moved gracefully through the dimly lit room, their laughter soft and refined. Women in elaborate lace gowns and men in perfectly tailored coats held delicate crystal goblets, swirling a dark, velvety liquid that looked almost too thick to be wine. The air carried a faint, metallic scent, but before Ayan could dwell on it, a guest raised their glass in a silent toast, lips curving into an almost predatory smile before taking a slow, deliberate sip. Something about the way they drank, as if savoring every drop, sent a cold shiver down Sarah's spine. As Ion glanced around the lavishly decorated ballroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The guests laughed and conversed in hushed tones, but despite the grand feast-like setting, there was no actual food, only the deep red wine swirling in their crystal goblets. Trying to shake his unease, he turned to a nearby guest, a tall man with sharp features and an unnervingly wide smile. "So, what's on the menu tonight?" Ion asked casually. Instantly, the room fell into a chilling silence. Conversations halted, glasses paused mid-air, and every pair of eyes, dark, hollow, and unblinking, slowly turned toward him. The tension was suffocating, as if he had uttered something forbidden. Ion swallowed hard, feeling Sarah's grip tighten around his arm. Then, just as suddenly, the eerie moment passed. The guests resumed their chatter, but this time their smiles seemed sharper. As Sarah wandered through the grand halls of the mansion, a strange realization crept over her. There were no mirrors anywhere. Not in the ballroom, not along the long, candlelit corridors, not even in the lavishly decorated bathrooms. For a house so grand, so meticulously adorned with antique paintings and intricate chandeliers, the absence of mirrors felt deliberate. A growing unease settled in her chest. She ran her fingers over the ornate gold frame of what she assumed was a mirror, only to find it held a dark, empty void instead of glass. Her breath hitched. Why would anyone remove every single mirror? Before she could dwell on it, a voice murmured behind her, smooth and amused. "Looking for something?" Sarah turned sharply, only to find Mrs. Blackwood standing too close, her unreadable eyes glinting in the dim light. As Ion wandered through the dimly lit hall, his eyes were drawn to a massive, dust-covered painting mounted on the wall. It depicted a series of families standing in front of the same Blackwood mansion, dressed in period clothing from different eras, Victorian, 1920s, 1950s, and more. Their faces were eerily familiar. His heart pounded as he stepped closer, wiping away a thin layer of dust. His stomach dropped. The most recent family in the painting, a young couple standing stiffly at the mansion's entrance, looked exactly like him and Sarah. The same dark eyes, the same nervous smiles. Cold dread crawled up his spine. He turned to call Sarah, but before he could speak, a soft, knowing whisper echoed behind him. A perfect addition to the collection. As Ion and Sarah stood near the ballroom's edge, trying to shake the growing sense of unease, they caught fragments of hushed conversations. The guests spoke in elegant yet antiquated tones, their words carefully chosen, too rehearsed, too measured. But one whisper cut through the low murmur like a blade. "The feast begins soon. Prepare them." Sarah stiffened. Ion felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. The voice was soft yet laced with something sinister, something hungry. He turned his head slightly, catching a glimpse of the speaker, a pale-faced woman in a deep crimson gown, her lips curved in an unsettling smile, revealing teeth just a bit too sharp. Ion's breath hitched. He wasn't sure if she was looking at him, but he felt watched. Every instinct in his body screamed that they needed to leave, now. A sudden, echoing clank rang through the mansion as the grand double doors slammed shut, the heavy iron locks clicking into place. The sound sent a chill through Ion and Sarah, their unease turning into full-blown panic. Mr. Blackwood stepped forward, his once charming smile stretching wider, too wide. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows across his sharp features as he raised his glass in a mock toast. The guests fell silent, their faces expectant, eyes glimmering with something dark and primal. "Welcome to the feast," Mr. Blackwood announced, his voice smooth, velvety, hungry. Ion grabbed Sarah's hand, but before they could move, the air grew thick with the scent of something metallic. The guests, once poised and elegant, began to change, their eyes darkening, their smiles revealing long, glistening fangs. "And tonight," Mr. Blackwood continued, his gaze locking onto them like a predator savoring its prey, "you are the main course." Sarah's breath hitched, Ion's grip tightened. The realization hit them like a crashing wave. This wasn't a party. It was a trap. Ion and Sarah stood frozen as a ripple of eerie excitement passed through the room. The once sophisticated guests straightened their postures, their smiles stretching unnaturally wide. Then, one by one, their mouths opened, revealing long, razor-sharp fangs that gleamed under the candlelight. The dim glow of the chandeliers flickered, casting unnatural shadows as the guests' eyes darkened, then burned a deep, glowing red. Their refined, graceful movements were gone, replaced by a predatory stillness, their bodies tense as if restraining a hunger that had been building for far too long. A woman in a blood-red gown let out a slow, guttural sigh, licking her lips as she stepped forward. "Ah, fresh blood!" Sarah's breathing turned shallow. Ion felt his pulse hammering in his skull. They had to get out, but the doors were locked, and the monsters were closing in. Ion and Sarah sprinted through the dimly lit corridors of the mansion, their footsteps echoing against the cold marble floor. Their breath came in ragged gasps as they twisted and turned, desperately searching for any sign of an exit. Behind them, the laughter of the guests had shifted, no longer polite and refined, but guttural, hungry. Shadows moved unnaturally along the walls, stretching toward them like grasping hands. Then, Ayan's eyes landed on an old bookshelf, slightly ajar, revealing a dark passageway behind it. Without hesitation, he grabbed Sarah's wrist and yanked her inside. The space was narrow, the air thick with dust and decay. They stumbled forward, guided only by the dim, flickering light filtering through cracks in the walls. Somewhere behind them, they could hear the vampires closing in. The tunnel twisted and turned, and just as Ayan spotted a faint glow, a possible exit, Sarah let out a sharp cry. Cold, iron-like fingers wrapped around her arm, yanking her back with terrifying force. A hand shot through the darkness, gripping Ayan's shirt, claws grazing his skin. He struggled, pulling at Sarah, but the grip on her was too strong. "Sarah!" he shouted, his voice raw with desperation. Her eyes widened in terror as she fought against the unseen force, but it was useless. The tunnel door slammed shut between them. The last thing Ayan saw before darkness consumed the passage was her outstretched hand, reaching for him. He crashed through the tunnel's exit, stumbling onto the damp grass outside. For a moment there was silence, just his heaving breaths, his heart hammering in his chest. Then a soft, deliberate creak. He turned back toward the mansion, dread pooling in his stomach. There, standing in the doorway, was Sarah, but she was no longer the same. Her once warm, terrified eyes now glowed an unnatural red, her pupils razor-thin slits. Her lips curled into a slow, eerie smile, parting just enough to reveal sharp, gleaming fangs. Ayan's breath caught in his throat. He took a step back. Sarah tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. Then, in a voice that was still hers, but laced with something dark, something inhuman, she whispered, "You should have stayed, Ayan. The feast isn't over." Ayan turned and ran, but deep inside, he knew this nightmare was far from over. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Veils of Night for more terrifying tales. And remember, stay safe. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.